Hello there, this is Daniel, of course. Hope you're doing really good. And this here is a reply to Richard. And Richard found me via the podcast. I was really excited about that because I think this is really the first time somebody that discovered my channel via the podcast reaches out to me. So without further ado, let's get right to this email. Hi, doctor. I'm taking you up on your generous offer in your podcast to ask questions about my insomnia. I'm a 61-year-old male and I've suffered from insomnia for years. I took sleeping pills for 5+ years, but concerned about detrimental effects of such long-term usage, I quit about a year and a half ago. My sleep continues to be interrupted, sporadic. I don't have trouble falling asleep, but after 2 hours, I wake constantly throughout the night, probably sleep 30 minutes, wake 30 minutes for the rest of the night. I tried CBTi via sleep app Sleepio, which I found unhelpful in that it focuses on sleep deprivation to induce exhaustion with the hope that this will lead to better sleep efficiency. For me, it just meant exhaustion and continued sleep pattern as described above. For the last 2 months, I've had success experimenting with CBD and THC, legal in California, but the residual next day fog, grogginess was too much. I've had sleep studies and did have sleep apnea, wore CPAP for years, but no longer needed after losing 150 pounds due to gastric sleep surgery. My local sleep MD from Stanford does not help other than prescribe more sleep meds, which I do not want to do. Do you have recommendations? I'm quite desperate. And I was going to say, congratulations on the weight loss, Richard. And then I emailed back to Richard just asking a little bit more about like sleep pattern, etc. And then he replied to me 22 hours ago. Thanks very much for the quick response. Let me try to respond. Taking last night as an example, I went to bed at 10 p.m., read Kindle Paperwhite until 11, slept until 12:30, then 30 minutes wake sleep pattern until last I saw about 4 a.m., slept from 4 a.m. to 6:30 a.m., which is unusual. Usually I don't get that last burst of sleep and will get up 5:30 or 6. I don't usually sleep during the day. If I do, it is never for more than 15 minutes. I don't feel relieved or rested after a short nap. I find it very difficult to stay awake in the evening. So it sounds to me, Richard, as you tried a little bit of CBT via that Sleepio app, and the thing is that, I mean, the technique I'm sure that they're using in that app is what's called bedtime restriction or sleep restriction, and it is a good technique. Like, it is a really important one. But the thing is, like, without understanding, why you're supposed to do that and what insomnia is, etc., it's very hard to really feel benefit for it. If you don't understand why you're doing it, that makes it really hard to do. So I think I'm going to take an opportunity here of like doing. Because I feel like a lot of people I've interacted with lately have maybe done a little bit more of like formal CBTi, and I'm going to take this opportunity to just do kind of a baseline, like just go over a little bit of what insomnia entails, and then go over what the best strategy is for getting over it. So there's often this conception that insomnia is like a condition or a disease, and that it then, of course, requires a certain treatment. But insomnia is, if anything, is more of a symptom, and that's really important because if you think about it, I think one example I like to use is like if somebody has a cough, for example, and they say to the doctor like, I have a cough, and the doctor goes like, okay, well then I think you should take some cough medication. Then you intuitively feel like that's not quite right. Like, there was no attempt at like trying to figure out why there was a cough and therefore like come up with the best way of getting over it. And it's a little bit with insomnia, same thing. Like, people often think of it as a condition, like, okay, you have insomnia, you can't sleep, therefore you should have this sleep medication to make you sleep, which that doesn't make any sense when you start understanding insomnia. And so speaking of that, understanding insomnia, let's talk about what it is and why people have insomnia. So typically, you have a person that either sleeping fine or had a little bit of a tendencies toward insomnia, maybe here and there, but was coping well. And then there may be an obvious trigger, like I retired, or I quit my job, or something happened in my life, some stressful thing happened, and that triggered insomnia. Or other people, it's like, I don't really know. There was no obvious trigger, but often what happens is that there's an initial period of like, you don't sleep well for, let's say, a night. And then that's a little odd and you don't think too much about it, but then it happens again. And now it's like 3 nights you haven't slept at all. And then you're like, this is not good. I'm going to try to do something about this. And then, you may go online and you're like, oh, I should try to maybe go to bed a little bit earlier and go to bed at the same time every night. And you try that, it doesn't work. And you're like, oh, something is really wrong. I have to try something else. Then you're like, I'm going to try some melatonin. No, that didn't work either. I have to try something else. And then the more things you try, the more, things fail, quote unquote, the more you feel something is really bad, and the more anxiety builds up and more preoccupation and worry. And what happens is that it's not so much that initial sleepless nights, whatever happened in the beginning, that is the culprit. It's more like the desire to get more sleep, the attempts at getting more sleep, the frustration with not getting sleep, that in itself becomes the problem. It's so bizarre. It's like the pursuit of sleep becomes what fuels the insomnia. So that's a little bit of like, physiology, and like the reason people have insomnia is, to some extent it's always due to hyperarousal. Meaning, a lot of people tell me like, why are you telling me I'm anxious? I'm not anxious. I feel pretty good. Well, then I'm like, well, you're monitoring your sleep a lot. You're trying to some degree, you must be a little bit concerned. Like, a lot of people are not all out anxious, but they're a little bit hyper aroused, a little bit preoccupied, and that, even if it's not frank anxiety, just that preoccupation, just like the questioning of why I can't sleep, the questioning of why I have insomnia, like, should I try this, should I try that, what's going to happen tonight, etc., is what fuels the insomnia. So I think we'll leave the kind of background discussion there. Now, I wanted to comment on, for the last 2 months, I had success experiment with CBD and THC. What happens is, with whether it is, in this case, CBD, or it is a medication for insomnia, it is tricky because if you have trouble sleeping, we talked about why that is. To some extent, you're a little bit preoccupied or anxious, and you have some degree of sleep deprivation, right? You haven't slept well for a while. Then let's say you take a medication like trazodone, and nothing happens. Well, then you go to that path of feeling like, oh my gosh, this didn't work either, that's not good, and you become more worried. But then, let's say it quote unquote works. You start taking trazodone, and you're like, oh, now I'm sleeping. The reason you're sleeping is because, yes, there is a little bit of sedating effect. It takes away a little bit of the edge, and it's also a little bit of placebo, like you believe. It boosts your confidence. But then what happens is, you're now taking trazodone for 2 months, and you have actually started eroding your sleep confidence. Like, you no longer believe that you can sleep by yourself, which, by the way, everybody can. Even when you're taking trazodone or CBD or Ambien or everything, it's always you yourself producing that sleep. It's not the medication producing it. The medication can just help you overcome that hurdle of falling asleep. Now, so let's say you're in that situation, you start taking trazodone, and you're now sleeping better for a couple months. Well, then you develop tolerance, like it's not working anymore, you become immune, and then the problem is you no longer believe in yourself, so you start looking for another outside solution. Well, the trazodone isn't working, maybe I have to take, Lunesta, instead of having that sleep confidence and believing that you can sleep or stuff. And that's where, if you take CBD, which is legal in California, and it's helping you sleep, that's, I feel conflicted. On one end, if it's working for you, that's good. But I think this is super, super important, is that that it is you are sleeping by yourself. The CBD, THC, that can take a little bit of anxiety off, and it can boost your confidence. But it's ultimately, the sleep is your own. You are producing sleep by yourself. And I want you to know that you're doing that. That's really, really good for your sleep confidence. So that's the second thing I want to point out. Now, and actually that segues well into what I was going to say also, which was sleep is the only thing that can produce sleep and make us sleep is our sleep drive, is our need for sleep. And it's just like when it comes to food, the only thing that can make us eat food is our appetite, our hunger, and the only thing that can make us hungry is fasting. Same thing with sleep. The only thing that can make us sleep is actually wakefulness. There is no other thing. Now, and that's where this sleep restriction or bedtime restriction comes in. And without fully understanding it, it can seem like, what the heck they're trying to do to me? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why should I spend less time in bed when I need more sleep? But it is really important. The most important aspect of it is actually like the wake up time, that, you get up the same time, no matter what. Like in your case, you described that it was unusual. You slept a little longer, usually get up a little earlier. That can be a problem, and the reason it can be a problem is that let's say you need 7 hours of sleep, which means you need 17 hours of wakefulness to produce that sleep, okay? So for 7 hours of sleep, to get 7 hours of sleep, you need 17 hours of wakefulness. And if you one day get up, at 6 a.m., then you're going to be, ready for sleep around 11. If you get up at, 8, you're not going to be ready till 1 a.m. And you can see how the wake-up time is what determines everything. If your wake-up time shifts from day to day, your bedtime is going to, the time you're ready for sleep is going to shift from day to day. So to have an anchor, to have something regular, that wake-up time is super, super, super important, Now, I don't think we really talked about this, but I'm going to make this assumption, Richard, that you, like most adults, that you need actually about 6 hours of sleep. And I say that because most people, when you ask them, say, I think I need 7 hours of sleep. But most people, healthy sleepers, people that don't have insomnia, they think they sleep 7 hours, but they actually sleep 6. So 6 is kind of the average. So, so you should spend, for now, I think it is true, you should spend about 6.5 hours or so in bed. And the reason is, again, by sustaining wakefulness, you build up a sleep drive. The sleep drive helps you overcome any insomnia you have. And then, but this is not long term. This is just once you start feeling like, okay, this is actually working, I'm falling asleep now pretty quickly, I'm sleeping most of the night, and I'm doing better, then you can relax these things. You can go to bed a little earlier, and eventually the goal, of course, is to get you to the point where you don't even have to have a schedule. You're just like anybody else. Like, you go to bed when you feel sleepy, and you get up when you're done. So that's the goal. But that's how this bedtime restriction works. So in your case, you went to bed last night, let's say at 10 p.m., and you ended up getting up at 6:30, which I know is unusual. So it sounds to me as you're typically spending around 8 hours in bed, which, if you don't have insomnia, that's perfect, that's fine. But when you have insomnia, you should spend a little less time in bed. So, towards the kind of a conclusion here is, this is not medical advice. This is just I'm just sharing my thoughts here. But a good strategy for someone like you, Richard, I think would be to do the following: get up every morning at let's say 5:30. Say 5:30, have an alarm, and no matter what, even if you had a terrible night, for now, get up at 6:30 and just get out of bed and start your day. Daytime is super important. If you fall asleep during the day, even if it's unintentional, that really disrupts your sleep drive. It takes away that sleep drive that you need. So it's really important to be active during the day and not sleep, and expose yourself to sunlight and be outside and things like that. As I read recently, just the other day, that somebody wrote good sleep starts the second you wake up. And it's true. You need a full day of being awake and as active as possible to produce good sleep. So let's say you get up at 5:30, stay awake during the day, and then go to bed maybe 11 or 11:30 or something like that is fine. And then in general advice, you should never go to bed if you don't feel sleepy. Even if it's 12 and you're I feel wide awake, don't go to bed. And in the opposite too, if it's 10:30 at night, you should go to bed. You felt like I should stay up until 11:30. Try to make it till 11:30. And then finally, regarding CBTi, I think honestly the same thing applies to that as to medications. Meaning, if you take something every day at the same time, or if you don't take any medication at all, what I'm talking about here, CBTi, it works. It works for somebody that doesn't take any medication, and it works for somebody who takes things regularly. But it does not work if you use something conditionally, meaning you go to bed at 11:30, and then you wait and see, and then finally like, oh no, I haven't fallen asleep in 3 hours. Now I'm going to take something. That is very disruptive. That does not work. So this was a little bit of a kind of a no. I was recording. Oh my gosh. Thank goodness. This was a little bit of a kind of a general first time consultation thing like I do in clinic. Hope this is helpful to you, Richard. And stay in touch. Finally, and this is also extremely important here, is that the first, like when you try to commit to like CBT, like you try like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try this, then what happens is the first 1 to 2 weeks is what somebody I just interacted with on the YouTube channel here said to me is like a yo-yo. I call it bumper ride, but she said yo-yo. It's like a yo-yo. You'll find that, you sleep terrible one night and then terrible another night, and then you're like, oh, this night was pretty good, and then it was bad again. Like it's really kind of really like that, like a yo-yo the first week, but the second week even. But typically when you get to like week 3, week 4, you're like, oh, I'm seeing a trend here. Things are getting a little bit more stable. And once if you get to that point, then you're good. Like almost, like I will say invariably, actually, everyone that I can think of that's reached that like foothold stage do good. So hope this was helpful to you, and I look forward to hearing from you again, Richard. And you have a really, really, really good weekend. Bye bye.